Hey, Newegg viewers, Juan Carlos Bagnell here, joined again, Matt, Gigabyte. Thanks so much for dropping by. We're going to talk about some monitors today, and a follow-up conversation because we had you here a little while ago to talk about the AORUS solution for a high-end gaming monitor.
Yeah, I think it was pre-Computex, and we were talking about our current monitor at the time, our 27-inch 144 hertz 1440p, right? And that was kind of our first. It was really a video about AORUS makes monitors, right? Because we had never made monitors before. Who are we to make a monitor? So it's kind of our first dive into that. And I tried to allude to some of the stuff coming up, and here we are today.
Now, Computex was a very happy discovery after having that conversation with you and you teasing some of the things that you were hoping to see in future products. Yeah. And now we get to talk about what's here now. So I want to jump right in, and we're going to start off with the KD25F. And I was hoping you could talk about what makes this a little different than the 27-inch that we had you on to talk about before.
Yeah, so the 27-inch was kind of our first foray into monitors, and we wanted to make it as widely appealing as possible. So we have 27 inches, 1440p, 144 hertz, what most people look for. And then we tried to differentiate with software.
Okay.
So all of our features that we build in. And now we're trying to get very specific in use case. So the KD25F is a 24.5-inch monitor, so like the #1 esports size.
Right.
And it's 240 hertz with a 0.5 millisecond response time.
Nice.
And it's also 1080p, because what we found is that gamers that play like CSGO and are pushing for that 300 frames per second, you got a 360 no-scope somebody, because we all do that,
I've never pulled it off.
It's on YouTube, it's totally possible. But if you're in that kind of gaming space, right, where every frame counts, and it's really Twitch gaming, then 0.5 milliseconds as opposed to 1 millisecond will make that difference, right? If we're at the same level, that gives me a little bit of an advantage.
Totally.
And so we're starting to design monitors for not only use case, but like specific games. So high-speed first-person shooters, that's what this is designed for, bar none.
Well, and that industry sort of set that now as a standard. It seems to be that the esports community has now dictated these are the specifications that we're relying on for this kind of hardware, and then also keeping things sort of equal when teams are going to compete.
Yeah, so there has to be some standardization, right? And so 24.5 seems to be the standard, 1080p, and then as fast of a refresh rate as you can. So 240 hertz and then 0.5 milliseconds is something that's a little bit newer. But we've been pushing pretty heavy in the esports scene. So we sponsor a couple teams. We sponsor G2 Esports, if you know the European team. I think they took down some League of Legends tournament a couple months back. So we've been slowly edging into that. And so we want them to have an all AORUS solution. So part of that is, okay, you guys are professional gamers, what do you want to see? So we take that feedback and it's kind of a two-way street. So it's not just us telling them, this is what we think you want. We just ask them, what is it you're looking for in a monitor? And they're very, very specific. When you come to esports, they know exactly what they want, what's going to give them an edge. They don't care about the marketing of it. They want to know, is this going to help me, become a better gamer?
So how has that conversation evolved? I mean, when we first started talking about AORUS and monitors, like you were saying, it was very much an introduction. And here we are, and here's our first offering, and we're going to be filling the rest of this out. Now you've got sort of a deeper relationship with sort of the end users and sort of the high-level consumers for these types of products. How does the AORUS solution set itself apart from other competitors in the space that have been doing this for a while?
Well, again, I think it starts with asking people how they use it and then adapting our technology to it. So, for instance, we call our monitors tactical monitors, right?
That's my next question. It's right here on my sheet.
Yeah, and so we build in all this software, and the last time we talked, I understood that from kind of a trickle down, right? People had explained to me, this is what the software does, this is why it's important. I'd used it, I thought it was cool. Going back to Computex, I actually got to talk to the people that designed it.
Okay.
And they went and they talked to gamers and they did things like, okay, we have all these cool features, like you can put a little reticule, right?
Right.
They're like, is this useful? And they told us, maybe, but you need to have a hotkey. Because if I have to take my fingers off of my keys and touch anything, or if I have to Alt-Tab out, it's useless, right? And so we went from, cool, we built all these features, to talking to somebody who uses it on a daily basis and understanding, oh, we need to build hotkeys for everything. And so that's why any setting you want to change on our monitors, you can set to a hotkey, because we learned that alt-tabbing out of a game is not an option. And that's not something that you would think about unless you're in that space on a daily.
Well, and even from the gamer perspective, that's not the high pressure situation that those competitors are facing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, as a casual gamer myself, I'm used to alt-tabbing out to change settings.
Totally.
It didn't occur to me that there's a better way, but if this is your bread and butter, you know things like alt-tabbing out isn't an option. If I can't do it with 2 keys, then it's no good, right?
Yeah.
And so they gave us this kind of feedback where we're like, what if we did it this way? And they're like, it'll work or it won't work, and this is why. And so we took their point of view and built something based on that instead of thinking that we knew what we were doing and giving it to them and saying, here it is. Right? So it was kind of a reverse feedback loop that brought us to these monitors.
Well, and so how does that further influence, because again, we got to cover the announcement of these products at Computex. I feel like Aorus is making a very specific kind of statement by calling a monitor a tactical monitor. And now we're into a second generation of products that are now using this as the label or the moniker for describing what these monitors do. How has that been informed?
I think overall people are starting to get the gist of what we mean by tactical monitor. It's not just, to us, a gaming monitor is about spec, right?
Okay.
And so 240 hertz and 0.5 or 1 millisecond response time, that's a spec. But the other additions that we put in there make it so that you can, I say be a better gamer, but they give you an advantage, right? And so one example is that on our last monitor, we had black equalizer.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people have black equalizer, right? And what it does is it takes the image and it looks for dark spots, and then it, based on a single dark spot, lightens up the whole screen. And so you get parts that are washed out. And so we thought about that and we're like, on paper it sounds awesome. How can we make this better? We also make graphics cards. And the way that we make graphics better is that we break them down into small little pixels, right? If I'm trying to draw a whole screen, I can't do it. But if I break down all kinds of little polygons, I get 4K. So we did the same thing with black equalization. We now have, we call it Black Equalizer 2, but it basically draws a grid on the screen, identifies if each little grid is dark or not, and if it needs to be lightened. So if you have a dark spot up here and down here is light, it will only apply black equalization to this specific area, and we can get more and more refined with that grid depending on what kind of application you're using. So again, we're taking these little advantages that we have with the firmware and trying to make it so that you have an advantage in your game. Because if I can see you in a dark corner and you can't see me in a dark corner, that's an advantage.
Totally. That made me really excited to actually see that firsthand, because that sort of gamma or boosting or high brightness modes, you know, we see a lot of sort of lazy HDR implementation, not necessarily from gaming manufacturers, but like on consumer TVs and stuff. Those of you who were complaining about, you know, your favorite fantasy shows being too dark for this last season, a lot of people were starting to go into the settings on their TV. And the solutions there haven't always been great. But to see it in action, it reminded me a lot of when we started talking about better video compression, where you're taking smaller samples of the image to try and localize where do we need better image fidelity versus where can we kind of soften or, you know, extract, dump information. Seeing that in action was really exciting, because now that looked like it worked better than some of the lazier solutions that I've seen on other products.
Yeah, it's all about refining, and that's one of the cool things about the way we designed our monitors is that all this, we call it software, but it's really firmware running on the monitor. So when we make an update, we update the firmware on the monitor just like we update the firmware on your phone, and all of a sudden this new feature is now built into the monitor. You don't have to buy a new monitor for that feature to become available. So as we refine things, as we get more feedback and they're like, hey, can you make it a little bit better here, you know, whatever, since all that processing is done on the monitor itself, we can make those refinements, come out with an update, and boom, you get a better experience. It's about being smarter and more efficient with the horsepower that we have in a monitor, as odd as that kind of sounds.
So, Black Equalization 2, that was one of the things that you were showing off that I was really excited about. What are some of the other software advantages that this firmware approach can bring to an esports spec gaming monitor?
Well, for esports specifically, we wanted to get the lowest response time. And so, to me, 1 millisecond and 0.5 milliseconds sounds like the blink of an eye, you know, if that. But again, this is small little advantages that you have over the competition, right? And so we introduced the 0.5 milliseconds, 240 hertz refresh rate. If you're fast enough to do it, the monitor is fast enough to show you, right? And so we want to keep up with the skill level of the players as well. And that's not necessarily a tactical advantage, that's just, I have better hardware, right? And so that's really important when it comes to not just professional gaming, but you're at home, if you're looking to squeeze out the most out of your system, you spend a lot on the system, on the graphics card, on your monitor, you need it all to work together, right? And so we don't want to have one limiting factor. And if you think about it, the monitor is really the last interface that you have with your system. Sure, we have a keyboard and mouse and talking about blue keys, red keys and everything, but your experience in computing is in the monitor. And we're trying to come at it from that approach where it's something that you interact with seamlessly and not play with, you know, buttons on the bottom. We don't want you to set it and forget it. We want you to be able to change things that make sense for a specific game or a specific scenario.
Have you found that in the feedback with some of the higher level players? Like 240 seems like overkill, especially because I'm not playing a lot of Twitch gaming. I'm not playing a lot of first-person shooters right now. But has the industry sort of acclimated to that? You know, like I got used to 144. I also got used to 4K for my TV, stepping back. Oh, that's not as nice as it used. You know, 1080p used to look great.
Yeah.
Now, 4K didn't blow me away when I first saw it, but going back isn't as good.
Yeah.
Have you been finding that these types of, you know, the half millisecond response times, 240 hertz refresh rates, getting 300 frames per second actually driven from the graphics card, is the human eye really starting to normalize that? Is that starting to become like the standard? Or is this still like high level stuff?
The guys who know. So if you're a CSGO player, and professional or not, but if that's your game, you play 240 hertz. It's not an option to play at anything else, right? We have a guy on our team who helped us develop these, and he plays CSGO, and he walks by at our PAX booth and goes, "Oh, that monitor's not right." And I'm like, dude, it's not even moving, right? So, but this guy has lived and breathed CSGO for, what is it, 10 years? I don't even know how long this game's been around at this point, but it's been kind of the standard that we talk about with first-person shooters. He can tell by walking by. Now, I can't, but he can. So the people who know can tell the difference. And that's who the monitor is designed for. So if you play first-person shooters, and that's something that you've spent your money in building a system for, you might as well buy the monitor that was designed specifically for you.
That. So I want to shift gears now and talk about this. I need to preface this because you fed us a really good tease the last time you came on to talk about the 27-inch monitor. I sat down and we were just asking you, where would you go from your first monitor, from Gigabyte's first monitor with the AORUS label on it? And you basically described this guy right here.
Yeah.
Which I'm very appreciative that you gave us that scoop when we didn't even really know we were getting a scoop on this.
Yeah, so the last time we talked, this was specs on an Excel sheet. I hadn't seen it yet, but I knew that something along this lines were coming. And so here it is today. It's a 27-inch curved monitor. We basically have two versions of it. One is going to be a 1080p if you need more frames per second, and then we'll also have a 1440p version if you're looking for more immersive kind of gaming. It's also 165 hertz, so a little bit of a bump up from 144. And the curvature is a little bit different. So most curved monitors are, I believe it's 1800R, and this is 1500R.
Okay.
It's counterintuitive, but the lower the number, the more of the curve, right? That's not new. 1500R has been on the market before.
We've seen a few, yeah.
Most of the time previously, though, it was actually an 1800R that they bent a little bit more to make it a 1500R. It didn't come out of the factory at 1500R curvature.
Okay.
And so we looked into that. There was some backbleed issues, things like that. So we decided to go with this panel from Samsung because it's 1500R out of the box. That's what it was designed for, that's the spec of it, and so we're confident in putting it into our monitor knowing that we won't have any issues with the curvature of it or the backbleed of it.
The notion of overdriving a monitor, we talked about this a little bit before too, where we're overclocking, and Samsung displays seem to have become really solid performers for ratcheting up, you know, a slightly higher frames per second. Like we've even seen it on phones. There are manufacturers that can eke out much higher refresh rates on mobile displays too. Was that something that you had to work with Samsung on? Like, I'm sure there has to be like a certification process for.
We always certify it at the minimum level. So if we test 1,000, what's the worst that any of those 1,000 test? And that's the only thing that we'll put on the box. a lot of them can boost higher. And so we put an overdrive feature. Some boost 2 or 3 megahertz higher, some can go up to like 8. It's kind of the silicon lottery of panels, right? So that's just the minimum, is all we'll put on the box. But it is absolutely possible to push a couple megahertz extra. We put that in the software, turn it on, you'll see, you know, what it boosts up to. See if it makes a difference. I mean, it's a free performance boost, right? So why not?
So give it a shot.
Yeah, it's not gonna hurt anything.
Well, and again, kind of playing into that whole idea of the tactical software advantage, you know, being able to update that or play around with the firmware or tweak some of those settings in the software. I'm assuming that we're looking at sort of similar thermal performance, the Heatsink design from what we saw on the flat 27-inch.
It's a little bit different for the curved version. We don't have kind of the backplate built in as the heatsink this time, but because we have more surface area on the back, we found it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of another.
Gotcha.
Keeping the internal components, because with the flat panel, you only have so much area underneath.
Right.
When you curve, it curves in the back as well, so we have a little bit of extra depth to it as well.
And then I would assume we're still looking at some of the same HDR compliance.
So the HDR is still the HDR 400. We did step up to FreeSync 2, so it's FreeSync with HDR now. All 3 of our panels are G-Sync compatible, meaning you can go into the driver, check the box, and you'll still get G-Sync from it. So it doesn't really matter if you're team red, team green. Either way, you'll be able to get that, you know, synchronization at whatever frames per second that you're looking for, if it's 165 hertz or if you dial it up or down. So we started off with a baseline that we wanted to build upon. And so same thing that you got in the last monitor, you get the active noise cancellation, you get all of the software, you don't have to play around with the little button at the bottom.
Right.
And so, you know, we've just kind of continued that and kind of refined it a little bit. So we bumped up from 144 to 165, we added the curve, and we'll have, you know, a lot more coming down the road. I mean, the last time we spoke, we had one monitor, and there's a lot of companies who make one of something.
Right.
Just to show that they did, or maybe it didn't work. This is something that we're committed to and that we're gonna continue with. So today we have the 27-inch flat, we have the curved, and we have the esports monitor. Going forward, I think we're gonna get into larger sizes. So things like ultra wide, maybe, you know, triple kind of monitor displays. Maybe we'll come out with some kind of connection so that all 3 of them hang on your wall. I mean, we got nowhere to go but up from here because we put all the R&D into the software and into the firmware. Now we just got to find panels that match and make sense for use case scenarios.
Well, and finding the games that seem to fit with the solution that monitor would be best for.
Yeah, and so we came out with this because we looked at the games that we play at like PAX, and a lot of times we play racing simulation games because it has high frames per second. If you want to feel like you're in a cockpit, you need to have that curve so that you feel like you're looking at the side mirror. You know, if you're playing a F1 game or even, you know, a Microsoft Flight Simulator, you need that curvature so that you're in the game. Esports don't need that. Esports need speed and immediacy, right? And so we tailor the spec to the kind of game that we think you're gonna use. I wouldn't necessarily play CSGO professionally on a curved monitor, right? So we didn't build it for those specs. Built it for more immersion so that you feel like you're in the game.
Now, has there been any update? That feature that blew me away was the active noise cancellation on speech. Has that been tweaked or adjusted at all, or?
Yes, so we have, I think, 1 or 2 firmware updates for the 27-inch flat monitor, and obviously it's built in here, but all we've done is basically change the decibel profiles a little bit so that you get more cancellation of what you're looking for. So at first, we were all about all the spikes, right? Somebody drops something in the background, and you don't hear that anymore. And this time we've kind of smoothed that out for more of the hum in the background to try to cancel that out. So these are all algorithms that we can play with and we can fine tune over time based on user feedback and just our own feedback. I mean, we use these at every gaming show we go to. So as people say, hey, what if you did this? If it sounds good to you, we can give it a shot.
I mean, that, again, it's just blown me away. It's just incredible how many parts of the chain are now computers unto themselves. The audio processing capabilities of a gaming monitor now completely supersede what we used to have standalone breakout box controllers for way back in the day, which is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, we got 3 microphones just in this one thing. It has its own IC, so its own little computer PCB in the back that's doing all of the noise cancellation, the on-screen reticule. I mean, it is a little system unto itself, you know, and it's pretty cool when all of that comes together. And because we make all the parts that go into it, if one doesn't line up with the other, we have the ability to adjust both sides, right? So if we find that we need another feature on our graphics card or our motherboard or the software, we have all the insider information, all the source code for all of this to make sure it all lines up.
And it keeps it all sort of a healthy ecosystem under this one pretty little label.
It's cohesion, right? It's making sure that everything works. It's kind of a one-stop shop for troubleshooting, for just the outlook of things. So we're really excited that we kind of finally have the full solution.
We're shooting this video ahead of time. The release on this will be roughly when this video goes live? Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah, so as of shooting right now, it'll be live next week. So by the time you guys are watching this at home, I'm sure there'll be a link in the description below. You can click on it and pick this up.
Well, and I just know from where we were off of our first monitor discussion, the response for the flat 27-inch was pretty impressive. I was blown away.
Yeah, these guys blew me away. We ordered what we thought was a healthy amount, and you guys, specifically Newegg, sold them out. We had what we thought was a 3-month supply that you guys got rid of in 2 weeks. The response was amazing. I thought it would take us a while to kind of permeate into the market. I mean, because we'd never released a monitor before. A lot of the first time people saw the monitor, their first response is, oh, AORUS makes monitors. Then they played around with it, and then their next question was, oh, where do I buy this monitor?
Right.
And so that was a pleasant surprise for us, and a reason that we can keep pushing forward, developing different models, different sizes, all with that same technology, software, and R&D that we've spent probably 2 years now developing.
Nice. Well, Matt, thanks so much for dropping by again.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
I can't wait to have you back on to talk about that ultra wide that I'm sure will exist soon. Hopefully, like, you know, before next Computex.
Before my next upgrade.
Right, exactly, yeah, we were talking off camera about our own personal builds and upgrades. So folks, there will be links down below this video. You can get more information on the entire lineup now. We've got multiple options and multiple SKUs of AORUS monitors. Definitely gonna wanna check that out. And you're gonna wanna stay subscribed to this Newegg YouTube channel. It's gonna be where we're gonna have more conversations, future gaming gear, builds, probably some more Gigabyte and AORUS gear going into some of our custom builds, so you're gonna wanna check that out too. For Newegg Studios, I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, and I'll catch you all on the next video.